hall of the Celestial Concord Academy shimmered with translucent lights drifting along the curved ceiling like slow comets. It was the night of the Grand Harmony exhibition, a tradition older than most known star routes. Delegations from a dozen species filled the rising tiers of the auditorium, their attention fixed on the illuminated platform at the center. Every year the Academy presented one student as the main star, a performer chosen as the pinnacle of musical mastery across the Concord. This year, the spotlight had been reserved for a young prodigy named Lyra, a human student whose reputation had grown throughout the stellar colonies. She was known for her grace, precision, and her bond with the ancient piano instrument revived from Earth's archive. Yet minutes before the event began, murmurs swept through the backstage corridors. Lyra had fallen ill from a sudden neural strain caused by her recent hyperspace jump. Physicians rushed to her room and sealed it for treatment. The Academy staff scrambled to find a solution, but all preparations had been built around her presence. The audience expected perfection. They expected the brilliance of the main star. Without her, the carefully woven tapestry of the night threatened to unravel. The director of the exhibition, a towering figure named Ralcor, with metallic plates along his arms, paced with growing frustration. Around him assistants whispered furiously, offering half-formed ideas. None of them seemed viable. The director halted when he noticed a young maid at the far side of the room. She stood against the wall with a tray of tools and cleaning cloths, silent and still, her posture neat as always. Her name was Mira, a human assigned to maintenance duty. Though small and unassuming, she carried herself with calm discipline. She had worked in the academy for nearly a year, seldom noticed by staff and rarely addressed by students, except for simple requests. One of the alien assistants sneered and motioned toward Myra with a flick of a long tendril. Several others chuckled. The director raised a brow. The assistant spoke loudly enough for the group to hear. Why not send the maid instead if they needed another human that badly? Maybe the audience would find it entertaining to see someone stumble around the keys. A wave of laughter broke out. Myra looked down at her tray, cheeks warming, but she held her silence. The director sighed. This was no time for comedy. He needed a genuine substitute. Yet the academy had no other trained pianist on short notice. The schedule could not be changed without creating diplomatic insult across the Concord. The audience had journeyed months through folded routes to attend. The performance must continue. Another assistant, attempting to lighten the tension, pointed at Mira again and said perhaps she could pretend. More laughter followed. Myra closed her eyes and pressed her lips together. Though she bore their mockery with quiet dignity, she felt the sting of it. She had always tried to remain invisible, a worker doing her part. She had never asked for anything more, but she carried a secret. She had been raised in a distant colony where her grandmother taught her the old piano every night inside a small dome illuminated by drifting starlight. Mira had learned to play before she learned to read. Music shaped her mind, grounded her spirit, and calmed the storms of life. She practiced whenever time allowed. Even after leaving home to seek work among the colonies, she kept her passion close to her heart. She had never mentioned this to anyone. Now, she saw no choice. The academy needed someone. The main star had been canceled. The audience waited. She knew the ridicule that would follow if she volunteered. But she also knew the shame the academy would face if the exhibition collapsed. So she stepped forward. Her voice was steady even as her hands trembled slightly. She told the director she knew how to play. The room fell silent for a moment before erupting into louder laughter than before. Several assistants bent over, clutching their sides. Some mimicked human finger tapping in cruel imitation. A young student from the reptilian species clicked his tongue mockingly. The director rubbed his temples, exasperated, thinking this was another attempt at humor, But Myra did not retreat. She placed her tray down, straightened, and repeated herself. Her tone remained respectful but firm. She said she could play well enough to fill the gap. She did not claim mastery. She offered service. And though the staff mocked her, the director sensed a quiet conviction in her voice that gave him pause. Still, he was reluctant. The risk was enormous. If she failed, the Academy's credibility might crumble. Yet no alternatives existed. He asked if she understood the gravity of the request. She nodded once. Her gaze was steady, unshaken. The director studied her face and finally made a decision. Sometimes unexpected answers rose from unexpected places. With a deep breath, he declared that Myra would perform. The assistants froze. The laughter stopped instantly. Several protested in disbelief. They asked if the director had lost sense. How could a maid take the main star's place? This was unacceptable. This was absurd. But the director silenced them with a gesture. The schedule demanded a performer. Myra had stepped forward when no one else had. That was enough. He ordered them to prepare the stage. Myra walked behind the curtains as the hall lights dimmed. The sound of thousands of murmuring voices filtered through the panels. Delegates from across the concord waited for the human prodigy to appear. Instead, they would see a maid. She inhaled slowly and centered herself, recalling her grandmother's lessons. The piano was not an instrument of performance, but of expression. She must speak through it, not with perfection, but with truth. When the curtains rose, a ripple of confusion swept the hall. The delegates eyed each other. Many whispered in surprise. The Academy announcer introduced the performer with a heavy tone. The main star had fallen ill. A replacement from the Academy staff had agreed to take the stage. The hall tensed. Expectations dropped sharply. Some guests leaned back, disappointed. Others chuckled quietly. Myra stepped out. Her uniform was simple, her hands folded calmly at her front. She walked toward the piano at the center of the stage, the polished surface reflecting the star-shaped lights drifting overhead. The instrument had been crafted by expert engineers who replicated the original Earth design, enhancing its resonance to fill even the largest chamber. Myra paused beside it. Her heart hammered in her chest. She heard a few quiet snickers from the audience. She heard one alien ambassador whisper that humans were becoming desperate. Another said this was surely a joke. She sat down on the bench. Her fingers hovered over the keys. The hall fell into complete stillness. The director watched from the side, his metallic plates trembling slightly with worry. The assistants stood behind him, expecting disaster. Some students leaned forward eagerly, waiting to see the spectacle of failure. Myra touched the first key. The sound drifted through the hall like a drop of liquid, silver falling into a vast pool. It was gentle, fragile, yet impossibly clear. She pressed another key, then another, weaving notes together into a harmonic pattern that shimmered through the air. The hall's acoustic amplifiers carried the tones, upward until they brushed the high domes and echoed down like celestial rain, whispers silenced. The audience leaned forward. Myra closed her eyes. She no longer heard the murmurs or the doubts. She no longer felt the sting of the mockery behind the curtains. Her thoughts sank into the melody. She began to play a piece older than her colony, a piece passed down from her grandmother, one rooted in the ancient emotional core of humanity. It rose and fell like waves crossing an endless ocean. The delegates felt something shift in the air. Many alien cultures had advanced far beyond Earth's technological limits. Yet they often struggled to understand human emotion. Humans possessed an intensity, a rawness, a fire that mystified the rest of the concord. Myra summoned that fire and let it flow into every note. The rhythm grew richer, more vibrant. The chords struck with force that carried the weight of distant memories. The hall trembled faintly as the frequency harmonics resonated through the crystalline panels. A soft gasp escaped from the front row where a feathered diplomat sat. His species valued mathematical precision in music, yet he felt a sensation he had never experienced before, something warm and swelling in his chest. He described it later as the feeling of being lifted through sunrise. Another delegate, from a species attuned to vibrations, felt the floor pulse with human emotion. It overwhelmed him. He gripped the armrests and stared at Myra in disbelief. He had never imagined such depth could come from someone so humble. Myra's hands moved faster now. The melody burst into a brighter sequence. Each note flared like a meteor streaking across the night sky. She shifted smoothly into a new chord pattern. The keys echoed with passion and purpose. Her fingers danced, rising and falling like wings beating in synchronized flight. The audience forgot to breathe. The director stared, stunned. He had expected a mistake, a stumble, perhaps a simple tune. Instead, he witnessed mastery. Not the perfection of technical training, but the power of a soul speaking through music. This was why humanity had earned a place among the star-faring civilizations. Not for strength, not for technology, for spirit, for the ability to turn fragility into brilliance. As Myra reached the heart of the piece, the hall darkened slightly. The lights adjusted to match the resonance of the piano, creating a halo around her. She looked small on the stage, yet her presence filled the entire chamber. Her posture straightened with each rising chord. Her eyes remained closed, as if she saw a world behind them. Images stirred in her mind. Her grandmother's hands guiding her own. The sound of rain tapping gently against the dome. The way the stars shimmered above when she practiced late into the night. The dreams she carried. The struggles she endured. She poured them all into the music. Some delegates began to weep quietly. Their species rarely expressed emotion, yet the melody tore through their barriers. Others gripped their seats as they felt the raw, unfiltered nature of human passion. The hall had never witnessed anything like it. When Myra transitioned into the final section, the notes softened. They became tender, delicate, like whispers drifting through starlight. She let the melody descend into a peaceful arc. It lingered, stretched, and resolved into a gentle close. She lifted her hands from the keys. Silence filled the hall. A deep, reverent silence. No whispers. No laughter. No doubt. Only awe. Then, as if triggered by a cosmic pulse, the hall erupted. The applause roared like a storm across the chamber. Some delegates stood. Others raised their hands in their species gesture of profound respect. The hall shook under the magnitude of the ovation. Myra rose slowly, overwhelmed. She had not expected praise. She had only hoped not to embarrass the Academy. Now she stood in the midst of thunderous admiration. Backstage, the assistants stared at each other in disbelief. Their earlier mockery burned into shame. They had pointed at her, laughed at her, dismissed her. Yet she had delivered one of the greatest performances the Academy had ever seen. The director approached her with steady steps. When she turned to him, he bowed deeply, a gesture rarely performed by someone of his stature. He thanked her for saving the exhibition and honoring the Academy. Delegates from various species approached next. They asked about her training, her inspiration, her connection to the music. Some invited her to perform at interstellar gatherings. Others asked she would consider becoming a student of the Academy. She answered humbly. She said she simply loved the piano. Word spread far beyond the Academy. Reports traveled through hyper-channels across the colonies. A maid had taken the stage when the main star fell ill and delivered a performance that transcended species and culture. Many called it the moment that reminded the concord of humanity's heart. Myra returned to her quarters that night with her mind swirling. She had no desire for fame. She wished only to honor the music she had carried since childhood. Yet she realized something important. Even someone unseen, overlooked, or mocked could rise in a single moment and shift the course of an entire gathering. The next morning she received an official message. The academy offered her a full scholarship. She would no longer serve as a maid. She would study music, not as a hidden passion, but as her true path. Her hands trembled as she accepted. The assistants who had mocked her approached in silence. They apologized sincerely. Myra forgave them. She understood that ignorance often leads to cruelty. But she had proved them wrong through strength, not retaliation. In time, she became a symbol throughout the Concord. A reminder that humans, even the most ordinary among them, possessed a spark capable of astonishing entire rooms. HFY stories spread through star stations and colonies, each telling how a humble worker had stepped forward when the main star fell and played music that united the hall. And in every version of the tale, one lesson remained clear. Greatness did not depend on status. It came from courage, heart, and the willingness to rise when others doubted. Myra had risen, and the stars had listened.